Short little video today. This is just a comparison of the Xr650L and the KLR650. On the left is a 2002 Xr650L. It's pretty much stock. It might have some airbox mods. It has White Brothers exhaust on it. It's been jetted, according to the previous owner. It's been rejetted. I'm not sure if it's been desmogged. Haven't even really checked. Wouldn't be hard to do, but I guess I haven't done that yet. On the right is the KLR650. That's an 06 model, so it's the first generation, which I believe is like 1987, 88, somewhere in there, up until 06. This is the last year of the first generation models. And it has quite a few mods on it. Now, they're both 650 class supposed dual sport bikes. Should I say dual sport bikes? And you'd think, yeah, they're pretty much the same thing, and they aren't. They are just completely different bikes. First off, weight. You can just look at them and tell the KLR is just much heavier. I'm not sure the exact specs, but I believe it's 70 pounds, so that's a huge increase in weight. Now the KLR does have a lot more Farkles, this and that on there. The Xr650 is pretty much bone stock. So I mean, if you went and put some bag mounts and crash bars and this, I mean, you could increase the weight on the 650, on the Xr650 pretty easy and pretty quickly. The KLR, it doesn't matter if you've got it bone stock or a few added things on it. It's just heavy. It's just ridiculously heavy. So the weight's a huge factor. The Xr650L in the dirt feels just way better. Just so much lighter. And the engines are completely different. I believe they're going to be pretty close in horsepower. I think each engine's around 35 horsepower, which certainly isn't astounding, nothing groundbreaking there. It's old technology. It's not a very powerful engine, really. But it's still a 650. It'll pull your butt around about anywhere you need to go. The Xr650L has just an astounding amount of bottom end on it. Just crazy. And I think most of its power is down at the bottom. It just chugs along like a John Deere tractor. It's just amazing the torque that thing has. And it makes it seem a lot more powerful when you ride them back to back. But the power really tapers off towards the top of the power band. It really, probably about just past the mid of the power band, it really starts to taper off quickly. Doesn't do a whole lot of good to rev that engine out real hard because it starts losing power as you hit the higher RPMs. The KLR650 is totally linear to me, pretty much like a sewing machine, you know. It starts out slow. It doesn't rev extremely quick, but it doesn't taper off. The power just keeps building and building and building. So really, they just feel entirely different when you ride them. So first off, the Xr650L, the pluses, it is made for the dirt. This is a dirt bike that's street legal more than anything else. The range isn't very good with the stock steel tank on it, and a steel tank isn't really all that great on a dirt bike because one crash and a big dent happens pretty easy. So you probably want to go with a plastic, bigger tank on this thing. One of the, I don't know, it could be an advantage or a disadvantage. One of the differences is the Xr650L is an air-cooled motor. Now it's a dry sump engine, so it does use the frame as the oil cooler, and you can see that it has lines here that go from the frame. It uses the whole backbone of the frame and the down tube as not only an oil reservoir but an oil cooler, and it works extremely well. I suppose the disadvantage would be if you got stuck in traffic on a 115-degree day. you might overheat this thing, and you probably would overheat this thing. And I haven't personally done that. I haven't ridden enough miles to have overheated it. But I mean, these things are legendary for reliability, and that is a wonderful system. The huge advantage of the not having the liquid cool is obviously weight, but also, now if you get out in the boondocks somewhere and you crash it and you put a hole in your radiator, you're done. This doesn't have a radiator. That's a huge plus. Huge plus. Simplicity is there. It's a lot easier engine to work on. Well, somewhat easier, maybe not a lot, but it's definitely less complicated. There's less things can go wrong. Ergonomics, the seat, I can't complain about the seat. It's actually pretty nice. The bars are ridiculously low. I mean, just stupid low. That can be pretty easily fixed with some higher bars and some risers. It's not a huge deal. Excuse me. Now, the way they have this set up from the factory, though, the ergonomics are just terrible. It's just really awkward to stand up on this thing, and I'm only 5'8". So if you're really tall, you're going to want to do something with the bars. And, you know, for whatever, $100, maybe less, whatever, you can fix that problem. Not a huge deal. I like the brakes on the XR. It stops fine for me. I have no complaints about that. The cockpit's a little bit crowded. The foot pegs are a little bit high. Just doesn't have the greatest ergonomics. So, for being a dirt bike, you should be able to stand up on the thing 75% of the time, and you can't. You can stand up on the thing 10% of the time because it's just so dang uncomfortable. But that can be fixed. The KLR650. Probably the biggest disadvantage with this is the weight. And I suppose that could be an advantage too if you're out on the highway. And I'll tell you what, a lot of people have ridden these around the world. A lot of these people have ridden to the tip of South America. These things just go and go and go, and you can take this out on the interstate all day if you want to. I mean, it's not the ideal bike for it, but it'll certainly do it. It's certainly capable. The fuel tank is 6 gallons stock. I get about 50 miles a gallon, so 300-mile range is just, that's an incredible plus. Now on this one, I've put the saddlebag guards on there to hold the saddlebags up off the, you know, keep them out of the wheel and from rubbing on the side panels. And that doesn't add much weight. That's a really good mod. I've got the IMS pegs on there. That's a terrible mod. It actually, they sit higher than the factory pegs, so you actually lose leg room. So there's some options for lowering pegs, which, yeah, I would definitely not go with the IMS again. I paid like 80 bucks for them. Then as soon as I got them, it's like, wow, the shifter, I can't get my foot in there between the peg and the shifter because they sit higher. So I had to buy the IMS shifter, which was whatever, another 30 bucks, and had to wait for it to come in. But plan on a different shifter. If you put IMS pegs on there, you're going to need it. I've got the Happy Trails radiator guards on there, and I may get rid of those and just put the IMS tank on there, which I think you can get in 6, 8, and maybe even up to 10 or 12 gallons. I don't want one that big. 6 gallons is plenty for me. Yeah, you're going to want radiator guards. You take this thing off-road somewhere and you dump it one time and you put a hole in the radiator. That radiator is really expensive to fix, and it's going to leave you stranded too. Now the IMS tank actually wraps around the radiator where you don't need the guards, and it, according to other people, it gives you really good protection. Now the liquid cooled, I mean, that could be an advantage. That's definitely good on a hot day. I've never overheated this thing, but the disadvantage, of course, is the added weight and the complexity and the not being as bulletproof in a crash. Obviously, you wreck your bike or you hit a big rock, and when you tip it over, not wreck your bike, but just tipping it over on a big rock, put a hole in your radiator, you're done. You're stranded. You're screwed. And that's definitely a disadvantage. Ergonomics are pretty good. I've got the Sergeant seat on this, but I don't care for the Sergeant seat. It's lower, that's good, but it's really hard. It doesn't have enough cushion for me. And I've put some rocks risers on here. It definitely needed those. I put some Pro Taper fat bars on there. That's a big improvement. The power, I'm not sure if it's an advantage or a disadvantage. It totally would depend on riding style. I mean, it's pretty good on the street or fire roads to have that sewing machine type of engine. There's no surprises. But if you want to do some hill climbs or something, it's not a very exciting engine, that's for sure. It doesn't rev really quick, and it doesn't have a very good power to weight ratio. Suspension on the KLR is pretty much total crap. That's what everybody says. It's sprung for a 120-pound rider, and who in the heck is a 120-pound rider? I'm not. I'm 180, and it's just terribly undersprung for that, ridiculously. So plan on some suspension upgrades unless you're 120 pounds and 6 foot tall, because it's a tall bike, 35-inch saddle, somewhere in there. Now the Honda has a 37-inch saddle, and that's a ridiculous seat height, and that's definitely a disadvantage. It makes it awkward unless you have a 37-inch inseam, which I have about a 30-inch inseam, so I can ride it. I'm kind of used to riding tall bikes, being short, but is it awkward? Definitely. Absolutely. And you can definitely lay it down quite a bit, like if you stop on an off-camber hill, and downhill is where you put your foot down, and okay, my foot's already 6 inches from the ground. With the downhill, it's a foot from the ground. By the time your foot hits the ground, the bike's going down. So, and again, the suspension on this could definitely be tweaked for whatever you want. I've heard a lot of good things about the suspension. I think the front end is the front forks, I've bottomed them out quite a bit, which is kind of surprising considering I weigh 180 pounds. So I'm sure you could probably just put some heavier fork oil in and solve some of that. But I was a little bit disappointed with the front suspension on the XR. So between the two bikes, they definitely have their pluses and minuses. Now, can I tell you which bike is right for you? I can't. But I can tell you what each bike is better suited for. Now, the Xr650L is definitely going to be the kind of bike that if you want to ride it around your neighborhood, go exploring within 100 miles of home, don't want to do any overnight trips. It has a weak subframe. This one's already been welded. You can put a rack on there. You're not going to be able to really load it up all that heavy. So it's not really that great of an adventure bike if you're going to be out on the road for days and days, unless you really, really want to go ultralight. So the advantage for the Xr650 is definitely on the dirt. It's definitely more dirt capable. If you want a bike to just not do anything really overnight, or maybe if you're doing hotel rooms, I suppose you could get away with it pretty easy, where you didn't have to carry too much. If you want to do restaurants and hotels, sure, I mean, but you could do that on a moped. So I'd say the Xr650L is more of an 80% dirt, 20% street. The KLR650 is totally the opposite. It's 80% street and 20% dirt. The thing is a handful when you get it off-road. So much of the weight sits up high. Excuse me, just getting over a cold. It's really top-heavy. It does not handle good at all, in my opinion, when you get them off-road. Now, I know some guys have modded the suspension, and I've seen some guys get pretty crazy on the internet, you know, jumping them, and it's just not made for that, though. That's a pretty modded bike, and that's a pretty, you know, that's like a 5% rider. The other 95% of us can't really do that on a KLR650. It's just not made for it. What the KLR650 is good for, its huge advantage, is if you can just have one motorcycle and you need it to do everything, the KLR650 is definitely your bike. You can commute on that thing. You can ride that thing around the world. I've put probably 50 pounds worth of camping stuff on there and went out for, about 10 days at a time, and it'll handle it. Adding weight to a heavy pig is just what it is. I mean, you're not going to do any single track with the thing unloaded. You're sure not going to do any single track with all your gear on. You know, once you start strapping sleeping bags and stoves and tents on there, it really adds up quick. I've got backpacking equipment, but even 20-30 pounds added on that already heavy bike, it gets to be pretty dang heavy. But You can still do a little bit of light exploring. Maybe you see a fire road you want to check out. You can do gravel all day. So if I lived on a farm or somewhere rural and the trails, I had really good trails right next to my house, and I really wanted a dirt bike, but I still wanted to ride the thing to work on Fridays, or maybe, you know, take it down to the store 10 miles away to get a can of soda, I'd take the Xr650L. That's definitely the better bike. If you can only have one bike and you have to do everything on it, if you're going to take it to work, commute on it, take your trips on it, and still do a little bit of double track type of stuff, some Jeep trails, some pretty easy dirt riding. If you can only have one bike to do everything, the KLR650, in my opinion, is definitely the bike. I compare the KLR650 to an Army Jeep. An Army Jeep will go about anywhere. It ain't going to look real good going there. It ain't going to be real comfortable. And it ain't going to go real fast. Well, that's what the KLR650 is going to do. It is definitely the Army Jeep of motorcycles. So they definitely both have their place. And they're definitely both great bikes. I like both of them. And they are definitely a lot different. Now the Suzuki DR650 falls somewhere in between these two according to other people, and I've never had one. I've got a DRZ400, but that's a different class of bike. But I can't compare the DR650 as I've never had one, but supposedly it's kind of the best of both worlds as far as these two bikes, but I'm sure there's a lot of different opinions on that too. But anyway, having owned both bikes, that's my comparison. The KLR650, you can put that thing on the interstate and ride it for 600 miles. I've done it. It wasn't fun. It wasn't comfortable. Actually, it was more like a 750-mile day. But it's doable. I can't imagine going 750 miles on the Xr650L. That would be a brutal day. It's not really the right bike for the interstate or for long-distance type of riding. It's just not. I mean, you could do it, but it's certainly not going to be comfortable, and it's just really, really not the right bike for that type of riding. So I hope that helps somebody out to make a decision on which bike is best for you. If you're going to do a lot more dirt riding, get the Xr650L. If you're going to do a lot more street riding, get the KLR650. Thanks for watching.